I'm Kevin Davis, and this is the Catholic Family Podcast, and I am extremely honored and overjoyed to be joined by His Excellency Bishop Mark Pivarunas. I go way back with the bishop. I was in school here 18 years ago now, so he had to experience me as a high schooler, and thankfully it wasn't bad enough that he is graceful enough to come on the show and to discuss, well, his life and his experiences and what led him from being a boy in Illinois to now a bishop in Omaha. So, Your Excellency, I guess, where do we start? I guess the best place to start in asking your story is, where are you from? Where did you grow up? And I guess from there we'll go on and hear the rest of your story of how you ended up here.
I would like to begin using the words of Archbishop Took when he wrote his autobiography in French back in the 1980s. I thought it was very appropriate, and I can say the same words for myself. I will sing the praises and the mercies of God forever. And I can't be grateful enough to have been born of a Catholic family. My mother was an immigrant from Italy. She immigrated here from, I believe, Solcedo, Italy, when she was 4 years old. Catholic, very much Catholic background. My father, he was born in Chicago, but my grandparents, my father's parents, they were from Lithuania, very Catholic family. And it was a beautiful time to grow up in the Catholic faith. I went to a parish school that had about 1,000 kids from second grade to eighth grade. So I had Catholic education all my life. As a family, we went to Mass every Sunday. During Lent, we go every day. As a family, we practiced going to confession weekly. It was a thing to go on Saturday. The whole family went for confession. When there was novenas or Stations of the Cross, we did those things as a family. Prayed the family rosary, wore the scapular. So I'm very blessed to have had some very good Catholic parents. I was growing up in the 60s, and so those were turbulent times, of course, especially right after Vatican Council II. So I remember the battles my father used to have with the priest with regard to the changes. My brother was in a Catholic seminary, and my parents, after I believe it was like 3 years in a seminary, my parents, counseled them to get out of the seminary because things were changing very quickly. Just a interesting kind of a experience that I had when I was in kindergarten, in first and second grade. We had nuns helping in kindergarten, first grade. I was in a public school because our Catholic school did not have a kindergarten or first grade, but we did go to CCD. And it's interesting because at that time there were sisters who were very, very conservative, and there were sisters who were very progressive as well. But we did get the faith instilled in us. I never forget my second grade teacher, Sister Mary Grace. I attribute a lot to her teaching me for my first communion and confession. I remember she wrote on the board hell, and she went into a whole class, religion class on what hell is going to be all about. And when I went home, I was resolved, dear God, I don't want to go to hell. But she instilled that fear in us. Third grade, I received I got confirmed in third grade. Things were still very, very conservative back then. Fourth grade, things were great. And fifth grade, things began to change and change very quickly. The sisters, changed their habit, got a modified habit. I think I go back to fourth grade. The priest at the time came into our classroom to give a class instead of sister, and he drew a big mountain on the board, and he said, this mountain represents life, and the top of the mountain's heaven. And he said that we're going up the Catholic road, but if you don't want to go up the Catholic road, all religions basically follow the same path to heaven.
And when was it been, Your Excellency, approximately?
I'm trying to think here now. This must have been about 67, 68. So it was very upsetting to my father. Like, why are we spending all this money to send you to a Catholic school if they're telling you don't have to be a Catholic? So very quickly, things were coming to a head at this parish. This parish was very, very progressive. And I'll never forget the day this priest gave a very liberal sermon. And right in the middle of the sermon, my father snapped his finger and said, we all got up, genuflected, and walked out. And I'll never forget that because the church was packed, and we were up in the front. That was on, I believe, a Sunday. I remember the day very clearly. About a day or two later, I'd been home from school, and my father was working, doing something in the kitchen, putting up some wallpaper or something. Doorbell rang, and he said, go see who it is, and there was the pastor. And I went and said, Father Madden's at the door. And my father said, well, tell him apologize. I would come and greet him, but I'm putting up this wallpaper. I can't, everything's wet right now. I got to put it up right now. So I asked Father, would you come in? My father's working in the kitchen. He can't come and greet you here. So my dad was very respectful. And Father Madden said, about Sunday. My dad said, I know about Sunday. And so Father Madden said, well, that can't go on again. My father said, don't worry about it, because we're going to go to another parish. We're done. So we went to another more conservative parish. So I'm thinking this is about 68, 69. And then from around that time, we knew something was wrong in the church. We knew there was elements there that were no good. We looked for what was the most conservative parish we could find. And then we were able to hear a lecture by, at the time, Brother Dennis Chacoin, and he explained and put everything together that the changes in the church and whatever, they were obviously done to destroy the church, destroy the faith. This tied in with Our Lady's Third Secret of Fatima. So we began attending a Mass up in northern Chicago. Father Leonard McNamara, he was an old priest, a very, very holy priest, and he was allowed to have the Latin Mass. He was basically retired. I believe he was in his late 80s, and he would have Mass at the side altar of Our Lady. I'll never forget his custom when he go out for Mass was to have a flower to Our Lady. He'd go out and genuflect as best he could and put the flower on Our Lady's feet, Our Lady's feet at the statue, and then begin the Latin Mass. And it's kind of interesting because we could basically tell who were the ones who really knew what was going on in the church and who were not. Because as Father Leonard McNamara was passing or distributing communion, a Novus Ordo priest, a modern priest, would come out and go over the table, the modern tabernacle, and he'd go to distribute communion, and people would get up and walk away from him and go over to Father Leonard McNamara. So we knew, those people know that the Novus Ordo is not a good Mass.
And did you know, Your Excellency, as a boy then, how did you feel about it? Did you understand what was happening, or was it more of obedience to your parents?
No, I understood, because I could see the fruits of what was going on. I remember my brother in the seminary, his first 2 years, things were very, very conservative. And then there was a drastic change when he came back. Just a liberal, amongst the other seminaries, a liberal mentality. And now they were trying to introduce guitar masses, and instead of Mass up in the church, they go down to the cafeteria and set up a table and all this. It was very, very, very liberal. And I know the battles my father used to have. My father would sometimes talk to the priest about, why don't you preach about the Rosary or about Our Lady or something of this nature? And unfortunately, things were going more along the lines of social issues and political issues as well. But I could see the battle going on, and I can see my father would come home and explain what is wrong here, what's wrong there, and why this isn't right, and what is that right. And so it was a very much of a learning process. But I also have to say that it took a lot of courage for my father to have us all walk out of the church right in the middle of Mass, and then to confront the pastor of the parish there. When we couldn't make it to Father Leonard McNamara up in north side of Chicago, we go to the Byzantine Catholic rite. So that was not too far away. I remember, I think it was probably on a First Friday, we were going to make our First Fridays, and the priest came out of the confessional, and he looked around and he pointed to me, and I looked around like, he's only pointing to me, and he said, yes, you, come on back. And he said, I need a server. I said, Father, I wish I could, but I have no idea how to serve the Ukrainian Byzantine Rite. I have no idea. He said, well, I'll help you. Just get a cassock on, and you put on this. It was almost like a tunic, very, very ornate. He says, here's a booklet. So you have Ukrainian with the pronunciation and English on the other side. So it's just like what we have in the Latin, right? We have Latin on one side and English on the other. This was Ukrainian on one side, English on the other, and it had, they could spell it out, with phonetically spell out the words. So you could make it out. And when to ring the bells, and he said, I'll whisper to you what we're going to do. So they had the iconostasis, and everything was very, very solemn. I knew we don't genuflect, so we would bow profoundly and we'd make the sign of the cross with 3 fingers going from right to left. But we were still Latin right. But I have to say that my vocation really came, which this might sound odd, but it came when I went to public school for 1 year, a freshman year. There's probably about, I'm guessing, 2,000 or 3,000 kids in the school. In south side of Chicago, it was very, very rough. You had to learn how to fight. You're always watching over your back to not get beat up, not be in the wrong part of the school at the wrong time. But it was extremely immoral. And that's what shocked me more than anything else. Some of these students that used to be at the Catholic school I went to are now in public school, and they lived as if there was no heaven, no hell, no commandments. And I was really shocked by that, because going back to 2nd grade with Sister Mary Grace, she talked about hell. And I was always in the back of my mind, you don't want to go to hell, because the way Sister Mary Grace explained it, it's not going to be, it's not going to be nice, and it's going to be for all eternity. So interestingly, after that year of public high school, I was resolved that I wanted to give my life to God. I wanted to secure my salvation. And I thought the best way I could do that is by becoming religious. So it was still another year before I joined a seminary. I joined a seminary when I was 15, went to 1 year of Catholic high school, and then joined a seminary. This was in Idaho. Interestingly, we had a Father Clement Kubish. Providentially, he was from Omaha, Nebraska. And when you hear his story, it was one of a battle as well. When the changes came with Vatican II, and especially the Novus Ordo, Father Clement Kubish didn't go along with the changes. And the Archbishop Sheehan at the time, told Father, you either go along with the changes or you have to get out. But if you go along with the changes, then you're going to it will give you a higher retirement, more money for your retirement. And Father Clement Kubish told the Archbishop, he said, hell is not just for a long time, it's forever. And he walked out. So Father Clement Kubish, had been taking care of some people here in Nebraska. He went to Idaho to help out the big community there. And those were just very, very happy days with Father Clement Kubish as the priest that was our confessor and offered Mass for us and gave sermons. And he'd been priest for many, many years, so he had many wonderful experiences that he could relate to, but he had a battle as well. So when I joined a seminary, it was not to become a bishop, not to become a priest, just simply to give my life to God, secure my salvation, and I wanted to put myself in a position where I would be most favorable for pleasing God and serving Him and saving my soul. And then it was by being a religious, I realized the good that could be done as a priest. I was told it was God's will that I begin studies for the priesthood. So those were long days of studies, and also at the time we were running both a grade and high school. And so very, very early on I began teaching in the school. It began with 5th and 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade, and finally into high school. After Bishop George Musey ordained me in 1985, after 11 years, I was 26 at the time, I was working at Mount St. Michael's. We were running the high school. Back then, we had many, many border students. We think we have a lot of border students now here in Omaha, but I remember in 1977, our first year at Mount St. Michael's, 77, 78, we had 100 borders boys. So I took care of 45 border grade school, and there was 55 high school boys. So about 100 students. And then we had a lot of religious back then. We had I believe, between seminaries and religious brothers, I think we had 65 or 70. So we had a very good number about Mount St. Michael's. But so in 1985 I was ordained. And one of the things that we did, following the footsteps of Father Dennis Chacoin as a priest, we began to give lectures around the United States. This is how CMRI grew so quickly, because of the lectures on Our Lady of Fatima and also the changes in the church. They kind of go hand in hand, because Our Lady, besides her message of prayer, penance, amendment of life, she talked about communism, Russia spreading her errors. She also talked about so many souls going to hell and the need for prayer and sacrifice, praying the rosary. But she also gave that third secret that was to be revealed in 1960. And as we know, John the 23rd basically squelched the secret. And it was not without a good reason, because the changes in the church were very soon to come about. So we would give lectures around the country, and one thing that really made an impression on me for the need to stay put in one place is that I gave a lecture up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I believe at the time we must have had about 170 people at the lecture. And that by this time, for myself, this might sound archaic, but we had this. What kind of a project? It's not a PowerPoint. They didn't have PowerPoints back then. It was like you get a transparency sheet and put it on something, and it would project it onto the wall. So we use these sheets. So when we're giving the lecture on Our Lady of Fatima, we always began with the Rosary, had a statue of Our Lady there, and then I'd introduce myself, who I was, and start talking about the message of Fatima, and then from the message of Fatima go right into the changes in the church. And I always like to use those transparencies. I still have them, even though it'd probably be like, boy, that's ancient. But we had quotes from what the Catholic Church taught, and then we'd show what Vatican II was teaching. And we'd have photographs and pictures. And so I was telling the people, I'm not going to tell you my opinion. I'm going to tell you what the Catholic Church has always taught. I'm going to also tell you what has changed in the Catholic Church in Vatican II. So when people had questions, I could say, well, okay, here's this, and here's this. Not my opinion. This is like Pope Pius XII, Pope Pius XI, St. Pius X, and this is what Vatican II said, whatever. So people could see it right then and there. We had such a wonderful turnout. I have to laugh. So we had, after we gave about an hour lecture, you don't want to talk any longer than that because you wear people out. We gave a little break, 5-10 minute break, and we had questions and answers. And a lot of times then the real questions come out, about where do we go, what do we do? So one of the first questions was, this man raises his hand and says, Father, I looked up your name in the Catholic directory. Your name's not in the Catholic directory, so I don't think you're a Catholic priest. And this other man stood up and said, we know everything he's saying is true. Who cares if his name is in some dumb book? What he's saying is true. We all think this way. And this man said, Father, we're ready to leave right now. We're going to leave the modern church. Where do we go from here? What are you going to offer us? And I said, well, I'll be here till tomorrow. Then I got to fly out, but I'll be back in a month or two. And I can see the great disappointment. You let everybody to know what's going on in the church, and we didn't have anything to offer them because at that time we had very few priests. So it was a disappointment for me. We had a sign-up sheet for people to write your name, address, phone number, so we could try to contact them in the future. But I was thinking, we got to do something different. Now, other priests, Father Benedict Hughes was giving lectures, Father Dennis Chacoin was still giving lectures all around the country, and even in other countries as well. So I gave a lecture in Omaha, Nebraska. It was at I think it was the Hamilton Inn near the Westroads, and we had a very good turnout, very good response, and the same thing. What do we do? Where are we going to go from here? So I said, well, it was on a Saturday. I said, so tomorrow, Sunday, we're going to have Mass. And we had, at that time, a small chapel. I said, give the address, we're having Mass at this time. And then I was thinking, this is nice, but we need to do something more than just this Sunday. I also, after we gave the lecture, between the lecture and the question and answer period, one of the front desk called me and said, there was a call from somebody from O'Neill, Nebraska, and he apologized he can't make it to the lecture. It's like 3.5 hours away. He's a farmer. He can't make it, but he wants to know if you would come and give a lecture up there. So I got the fan's phone number. I talked to him very briefly, during that span. I said, I'll be up there next Saturday. So I talked to our small group of parishioners. We had maybe about 35 people. And I said, I'm going to have to come back next week. So I'll announce that there will be Mass next Sunday. But next week, I'm going to come in on Friday. We'll go up to O'Neill, give a lecture up there as well. But I kept saying the people want something. They want something that you can't just take something away from, saying, okay, the Novus Ordo is a invalid Mass. Vatican II is issuing a new religion, and you can't go back there anymore. We got to give them something in the absence of that. So that's how things really got going. I for a year, from 87 to 88, I flew every weekend from Spokane to Omaha, and then do a nice circuit here and then fly back on Sunday. It was in 1987 when we first started coming here, that we started coming in July. I believe it was September, the people were asking for a school, and now we had to try to get a school registered, and through an interesting situation, we were able to get the school registered, and we started our school, Mater Dei Academy. That wasn't known at that time by that name, but 1987 is when we started the school. I believe we had 9 students. And I could also have to say this, that after a year of coming back and forth, Father Dennis Chacoin, who was the superior, he said, you can't be doing both, trying to run at Mount St. Michael's and then do your thing in Omaha, so you're going to have to make a decision. So in 1988, I made a decision, yes, I'll just come full-time into Omaha. So by that time, we had several Mass centers, plus I was covering Minnesota, Colorado, and also down in Kansas as well. And my thought was, if we can, when opportunities come up to establish a Mass center, establish it and do the best that you can, and the rest is in God's hands. And then in the future, things will fall into place. Now, Father Dennis, in 1989, he resigned being Superior General, and I'm sure everyone knows that unfortunately he came down with cancer and died. But I was elected Superior General in 1989. So first thing I did was I wanted to move the seminary in Spokane to Omaha. And the reason why I did that was because Mount St. Michael's is a beautiful building. The Jesuits built it in 1917. 60 years later, 1977, we bought it. It's a beautiful building, but it has an awful lot of upkeep. And when the seminarians are always available, unfortunately, their studies were suffering. So I thought, we need priests, we don't need maintenance men. So that was one of the first things we did. As I said, we're going to move the seminary from Spokane to Omaha, and we're going to focus on, we want priests. So Mater Dei Seminary began in 1989. It existed at Mount St. Michael's since the 70s, but so we had a seminary there, and I also had one of the priests, Father Brendan Hughes, come and help me. So he was able to assist with some of these Mass centers, and we got the seminary going. School was going well and growing. Our Mass centers were growing. And then we had a very interesting situation. Now I'm not going to go into any of the particular details, but one of the heaviest crosses for me in my priesthood was a challenge that we encountered. And there was a Mass center, a church, and there was an unfortunate falling out between the lay people and the priest. There were issues with the priest. I thought there were serious issues with the priest. And this priest successfully was able to, I believe through misinformation, alienate the bishops of the United States from CMRI. So this was like 1990 to 91. And there was about 170 people at this church. All they wanted is the Mass and the sacraments. They had issues with the priest, and it wasn't until the priest died that we realized that the priest had some very serious issues when he left the Novus Ordo, and there was actually lawsuits involved with his leaving the diocese, etc. And the diocese didn't even know where he was at. I believe the diocese had to pay some reparations for the things that he had done in that parish. So I'm going to be very discreet about who and where and what, I'm not going to say. But we were basically without a bishop for about, I don't know how many months. I asked the bishops if they could please consider looking into the situation, sending a priest to the parish, talk to the people. I believe they had legitimate concerns, and it was all declined. So there was a lot of pressure on me. We had seminarians to be ordained and no one coming. We had about 90 students or children to be confirmed, and nobody coming to give confirmation. So I was under a lot of stress at that time. But we did have sisters, religious sisters in Mexico, working with Bishop Carmona, and so it was around this time that I invited Bishop Carmona to come and visit Mount St. Michael's. Our intention was just to kind of go over what's going on in Mexico and how our sisters are working down there, etc. And we had a very nice visit. And his visit, corresponded to our monthly, or I should say monthly, our yearly priest meeting. So it was interesting. But when Bishop Carmona left to go back to Mexico, he left a letter behind. So I never forget Father Ephraim Cordova saying, the bishop wanted me to give you this letter. I said, well, it's in Spanish, read it to me. And he says, to the superior, meaning myself, he said, I think that the time has come that your community is large enough that you should have your own bishop. And I thought to myself, I don't know if this is God's will. I'm going to present it to the priest and see what they say. So, like I say, Bishop Carmona had left. We're having our priest meeting, and I just had Father Ephraim read, translated from Spanish to English to the priest, his petition that he'd like to consecrate one of our priests. So I told the priest, why don't you just pray about it and think about it. In the meantime, I was made aware that Bishop Carmona was going to have ordinations in Hermosillo for his Mexican seminarians. So I asked if we could, if he would be so kind as maybe ordain some of our priests to go down there. And he said that would be fine. So I remember the seminarians and I flew to Phoenix. From Phoenix, we went to Nogales. Nogales, we went to Hermosillo. We had Bishop Carmona did the ordinations. In the evening, I had Mass, and then Bishop Carmona had confirmations after that. And then we drove all the way back to Phoenix that very night. We were traveling all night. I would never do that this day and age. It was pretty dangerous. Even back then, I believe it was like 1991, there was somebody tried to stop us on the road. I just told the seminarian who had gotten ordained to the subdiaconate, I said, turn your brights on and step on it as fast as you can and just show them we're not stopping. We're going to go right through. If you try to stop us, we're going right through. A little side note there. So interestingly, at that time, Bishop Carmona once again asked me, he said, this is in April, so do you have a candidate? And I said, the priests are still praying about it. So when I got back to the United States, we contacted the priest and said, okay, normally we have our priest meetings in July and in January, but we're going to have a special meeting. We need to give Bishop Carmona an answer. And I said, at this point, it doesn't matter. If you, as a group of priests, accept the proposal that one of us would be consecrated bishop, it's fine. And if you say no, that's fine too. But I said, if in the future you need ordinations, you need confirmation, don't blame me or ask me to come up with some other solution, because there is none. There isn't one. So long and short of it is that we had the meeting, and I was under the circumstances. The priest realized we have no choice. We don't have any bishops. This priest had alienated them from us. Bishop Carmona is offering to consecrate one of us, and so whatever is God's will. So we had basically a vote that the first vote was going to be whether we accept the proposal, and that was, I believe, unanimous. Then we had the discussion of who should be chosen. So each priest would leave the room, and then the priest would say anything they wanted for or against him. And I don't know what was said when I left the room. When I came back, one of the priests was saying, boy, if this is almost like the Day of Judgment, a little bit on the rough side here. So we had a vote, and one of our priests, Father Dennis Chacoin at this time, was in New Zealand. He voted by phone, and so I got elected to be consecrated. So then the consecration took place in September of '91. My motto on my coat of arms is to lay down my life for the sheep. I believe that the greatest work that we can do here on earth is to save souls, to get souls to heaven, to save them from hell. Sister Mary Grace, once again, from the second grade, don't want anybody to go to hell. You don't want to go there. But more importantly, I want that to be the theme of my life, to try to spread the faith, to establish Mass centers, to provide the Mass and sacraments for people. It's like the people are sheep without a shepherd. And the gift of faith is such a wonderful thing for all of us. I mean, we could have been born in another part of the world where we would not have been born in the Catholic faith. We could have been born in Africa or Asia. We could have been born a Muslim or who knows what. Our chances of salvation would have been a lot slimmer than it is for us being born in the Catholic faith. And not only that, but to have the true Catholic faith, the true faith in these times of apostasy. So what we've been doing since 1991, like I say, we moved to seminary from Spokane to Omaha. We want to establish the faith whenever opportunities present themselves, to try to do our very best to provide the Mass and sacraments. So as an example, like in Colorado, we've been going to Burlington, Colorado. It used to be Stratton. I believe it was since 2002 or 2003. But we were invited to go there. And we only had Mass for them every other Sunday. But then we were able to have Mass every Sunday. And we always had a group in Colorado Springs, but that group wanted us to come back and service them more regularly. Same thing in Denver. And I just remember in the early days, I would drive from Omaha to Denver on a Saturday, have a morning Mass in Denver, afternoon Mass in Colorado Springs, evening Mass in Burlington, and then drive back to Omaha and start classes on Monday for Mater Dei Academy. So I know that, you can't maintain it all the time, but eventually, as we have more priests ordained, then we're able to put priests in these places. So now, 2022, we have a resident priest in Burlington, a resident priest in Denver, resident priest in Colorado Springs. And I believe that, by the grace of God and the intercession of our Blessed Mother, the faith is growing. And a lot of people, especially in this day and age, are realizing, especially with Francis I, he is so radically not Catholic that people are grasping there's something wrong within the church. I'd like to show you just a real brief encounter I had. I was on the plane speaking to this, I would consider him a devout Catholic, modern Catholic. And so we were talking back and forth about different things. He was Knights of Columbus, very involved with everything else in the church. And so he was basically asking me, so what is your position? I hear you talk about the Latin Mass, you don't go along with Vatican II. I said, well, I'm going to be honest with you. Get right to the point. I don't think that this man's the Pope. And he was like stopped and stared. He said, about 10 years ago, I think you're crazy. He said, I don't think you're crazy at all. And that is the interesting thing in this day and age. When you say, I don't recognize this man as the Pope, there's no way that he could be the Pope. He's supposed to represent Christ. He's supposed to speak on behalf of Christ. Christ promised to be with his church all days, even to the consummation of the world. How could this be that Christ would allow his church to err and fail in such a terrible way? And it's interesting how things are really spreading very, very quickly. So we have in the seminary 18 here. We have in Omaha now, we have the secular seminarians here in Omaha. We separated secular seminarians from the religious seminarians, so the religious seminarians can have a more religious atmosphere, poverty, chastity, obedience, the evangelical councils. So they're studying in Idaho under Father Benedict Hughes and Father Gregory Drayman for the CMRI. We have in western Colorado our novitiate, so the postulants and novices will go there. They'd be under Father Bernard Welp, getting their formation there. And then we have our seculars here. This coming May, God willing, we have 6 more priests ordained, and they're from different parts of the world. We have one from Argentina, one from Poland, one from Scotland, and they caught me a little bit off guard here. We have, I think, 2 from the United States, but yes, there are 2 from the United States, and there's 1 more here. But it slips my mind.
So it's so international. It's easy to forget.
Yeah.
So many seminarians.
What's interesting, though, is that I was just talking to our priest in New Zealand. He covers the Philippines, but also there's a group in South Korea that wants us to start, servicing them with the Mass and Sacraments. There's also a place in Goa, India, that wants us to come as well. We have a young man that wants to join a seminary from South Korea as well. So it's an interesting, very interesting times that it reminds me that our Lord's promised the gates of hell will not prevail against His church, and I believe that's exactly what's happening. But by and large, I have no doubt that the faith is being kept alive, and there's pockets of Catholics here and there around the world, not great numbers, but pockets of them that are persevering in the faith, and it's especially through the intercession of our Blessed Mother. I was just also going to say, too, with regard to, particulars, I know that there's a lot of demand for priests. Everyone wants a resident priest. And what we try to do is we'll try to send a priest on a regular basis as often as we can. We do the best that we can. That's God's will. And then as we have more priests ordained, then we're able to make them resident or allow them to be resident there, and from there they can branch out many other different directions. I was just up in Canada with our priest up there, and things are very, very rapidly growing. His parish has doubled, almost tripled in size because of COVID, and unfortunately the people of Canada, they had very severe restrictions with the COVID. Novus Ordo churches were closed down. He kept his church open, and these people started coming to the church, and the Father was able to explain. And many of them remember this is the Mass and the faith that I remember when I was a child. I was very, very amazed and impressed by how quickly things have grown in Canada. And so God can draw good from evil. That's the amazing thing. I also want to say, too, I'd like to give credit where credit is due. When we bless the church where Father Zepeda is now in Denver, at the blessing of the church, I said it would not be right for me to not remember those older priests who right in the 1960s made the decision to break with the Novus Ordo and have nothing to do with the modernism and the false ecumenism of Vatican II. So we enumerated a lot of those older priests. I mentioned just one, Father Clement Kubish, but there was a Father White, there was a Father Fenton. A lot of these priests, I had the privilege of meeting them as a young priest. And they're the ones who really were the pioneers who kept the faith alive, and now we're just picking up where they left off. I have to smile. The same Archbishop who expelled Father Clement Kubish from the diocese for not offering the Novus Ordo, going along with Vatican II, he was the same Archbishop when we started building Mary Immaculate Church here in 1988. We started building it. We had a front page article in the Omaha World Herald. And it was interesting because the reporter said to me, he says, I'm not Catholic. I don't understand between you and the Archdiocese, and what's the difference? Could you explain it as succinctly as possible? And I said, sure. I said, I'm a Roman Catholic. I don't go along with the changes of Vatican II. I believe that the one true Church of Christ is the Catholic Church. I said, the Archdiocese does not believe that anymore. And he's writing it down. He said, I'm going to ask the Archbishop about that. So now the problem with the Archbishop answering this question was this. If he says, no, we still believe the Catholic Church is one true Church of Christ, then all his ecumenical endeavors go out the window with the Lutherans, the Methodists, and Anglicans, and everybody. It just goes right out the window because, hey, they're all the separated brethren, and it false ecumenism. We need to work together, and we're all part of the church. But if he says, no, we don't believe that anymore, then I'm basically right. So it's interesting. I was eager to see how the Archbishop answered that question, and he completely diverted it. He said, I do not wish to get into theology in the newspaper. And I'm like, it was just a yes or no answer. Either you have changed, or you haven't changed, yes or no, and he didn't give that answer. So that's pretty much a summary of what's been going on. We were, like I say, consecrated in 1991. Right after I was consecrated, Bishop Pomona passed away, unfortunate car accident. So we inherited all of his mass centers and taking care of his priests down in Mexico. And that was, to me, a wonderful experience. But by 1993, I was so overwhelmed with trying to cover everything in the United States, covering in Mexico. That's when I proposed to Father Daniel Dolan at the time if he would consider being consecrated to bishop to help me out in Mexico. I have to smile because in the United States, if you have maybe 40 or 50 confirmations, people think, oh, that's a pretty good sized group. The biggest group I had in Mexico was 450. That was on one occasion. And the priest, we had to have it outside the church because couldn't fit everybody. And the priest had this big microphone system, and he was praying every prayer, led the rosary, Stations of the Cross. He keeps praying to keep the people from talking, keep the people praying. And I don't know, I must have been on number 300. He starts the Litany of the Saints, and the priest who was assisting me would say, ¿Cómo se llama? What's your name? They'd say the name in Spanish, and I'd translate it into Latin, and then signo crucis, etc. So I put my hand on that man's head, and he says, ¿Cómo se llama? He tells me the name, and the priest starts the Litany of the Saints, and he goes, Kyrie eleison. I said, Christe eleison. I mean, by 300, you're almost on automatic pilot. So by 450, I was pretty well spent. I'm sure, thinking back, it must have been over 2 hours. Then the photographs come. And, if you know anything about the wonderful Mexican people, they love photographs. And there's always another one, and another one, and another one. We didn't get this one. I get another family member in. And I just remember the hours of all those photographs. But the beautiful thing about Mexico is how wonderfully the faith is being preserved there. In the cities, the big cities, it's very modern. It's just like the United States. Then you go into some of the rural areas, and it's very, very primitive. I remember going up to this mountain city of Torero, and it took us 2 hours to get up there. I remember the first occasion I went up there, it was very, very difficult. And on the second time I went to Torero, I had Father Dolan at the time. I was introducing him to Mexico because he was going to be consecrated bishop and help me out. And amazing, some of these places, the people didn't even speak Spanish. They spoke an Indian dialect. But the faith is still being practiced. It was just a wonderful thing. I was in the eastern part of Mexico. We're in this very, very poor, humble village, and the people were just, they gave me the best that they can. So there's a very small cot with a white sheet on it, no pillow. There's no running water, so I had a bucket of water. That's how you washed. And I was there for a day, and by the time I was done with the water, I was going to wash my hair, and I took the last butt of the water, and I poured the rainwater over my head, and I looked at the bucket. I says, "Dear God, how I wish I had some more rainwater." It was poor but humble, and these people they're doing the best that they can to provide for you. So we consecrated Bishop Dolan to help out in Mexico, 1993. By 1999, the priests of Mexico, I got to know them very, very well. They were the Trento priests, the group that Bishop Cremona had started. So I had mentioned to the priest I want them to have a meeting and discuss who would be a possible candidate to be consecrated as bishop. And that fell upon Father Martin Davila. And Father Davila was the one that accompanied Bishop Cremona to Spokane when I got consecrated in 1991. So I knew him very well. So I asked Bishop Dolan if he would accompany me, and down in Acapulco in 1999, we consecrated Bishop Davila. And then this past year, because of the situation with COVID and the restrictions of travel, Bishop Martin Davila was going to be down in South America, and I said, I think it would be really providential if you could consecrate Father Pio Espina. I've known him since he was a teenager down in Molinari, Argentina. We've gone down there many times. Comes from a very good Catholic family. His brother's a priest, and by the grace of God, Bishop Davila consecrated Bishop Pio Espina, and so now there's 2 bishops working with us, and we're very grateful for their help. And we're also looking in the near future a consecrated bishop for Europe as well. With regard to Europe, I think of especially like England. Father Oswald Baker, he had been an old traditional priest who never compromised with the modern Mass and the Novus Ordo. I used to send him holy oils. I had confirmations for his people there down in Downham Market. I had the opportunity to meet Father Oswald Baker, and when he died, his people petitioned if we could send a priest, and Father Riesling would be going there to cover for them for Mass, and then after that was Father Johannes Heine, who I ordained here. So they both alternate going to England, and now we have a group in Scotland that they've been having the Mass for them up there, and we have a seminarian from Scotland. He'll be ordained to the priesthood in May, so he'll be resident with Father Heine in Germany, but when he goes to England and Scotland, he'll be having regular Mass there. So he'll be able to spend more time, but I still want him to be working under another priest and staying in close proximity with another priest. And that's pretty much our practice. When a priest is ordained, we want him to get some type of further training under an older priest, and that's what we're doing, on a regular basis now. So we have 6 priests to be ordained this coming May. We have several congregations of religious sisters. The CMRI sisters, I believe there's 48 of them in Spokane, Washington. We started a group of sisters here in 1992-93. The Sisters of the Mother of God, there's 37 sisters here. And then we have Sisters of Divine Providence and also Carmelite sisters in Mexico as well. So altogether, the priest and religious working, I think we're about 160, 170 priests and religious working all together. And like I say, my goal is to try to provide the Mass and the sacraments for as many people as possible. And I'm very appreciative of the sacrifices our priests go through to bring the Mass and the sacraments to many, many of the faithful. When we think about it, I tell the priest, I know it's a sacrifice sometimes to offer a third Mass that travel great distances, but when we have priests ordained, they as priests need to utilize their priesthood. They need to truly realize the harvest is indeed great, but the laborers are few. They need the opportunity to work. That's why they're ordained to the priesthood. And on the other hand, when they're ordained to the priesthood, I simply can't support everyone out of Omaha. We don't generate that amount of money. So these places where they go help support the priest, most importantly, provide the Mass and sacraments for these people, but secondly, help to bring about a support of the priest as well. The other thing, besides starting Mass centers, we want to do our very best to start schools. And this coming year, we're going to be starting a school in Alabama, another school in Arkansas, and then we're going to be sending sisters up to Canada to help out with the school that's just getting off its feet. Because really, if you stop and think of it, the children are the future of the church, and we need to instill in them the faith. The world has become so immoral and corrupt that we need to instill the faith in these children so they don't lose their faith. They need to be instructed. They need the Mass and sacraments. They need the graces. A lot of families are struggling to keep their children on the straight path, especially in these times. So we're just doing our best to provide Mass and sacraments and save as many souls as possible.
You've been listening to the Catholic Family Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends and family. You can support the production on Patreon and PayPal and you can reach Kevin at kevin89davis@gmail.com.